morning.
Good afternoon, actually in Boston. Hi, everyone.
Excellent. Well, you guys, if you'd like to start the recording, you're more than welcome to do so, please. It is a wonderful day here in Denver, Colorado. And I have to say, guys, I am so psyched to have you here today for so many reasons. So first of all, hello, my dear friends of the earth. My name is Isaías Medina. I am president of WeCare2030.org and executive director of Goldfinger.net and Greenfinger Sustainable Virtual Deal Club and Family Firm. I am so humbled to moderate this panel today. The best prayer I know is to be grateful. So at the outset, allow me to thank Boston Greenfest and all of our sponsors for allowing this open, inclusive space. A big thanks to our panelists and to the audience for joining and for participating at the end with your questions through the WUVA app. The topic today is Smart Finance, Alternative Delivery Pathways. We have to be conscious that if all continues business as usual, humanity may be facing challenges like 1.5 billion climate refugees due to global warming and climate change. We are at the gate of the 6th largest mass extinction in our planet. We have been poisoning our oceans, our atmosphere, and our water, and creating many other issues of great concern for present and future generations. The current prejudicial linear economic patterns have led us irresponsibly to this status quo. All of us here today, as present generations, have the irrefutable responsibility to future generations to allow them to inherit a planet without irreversible damages. Some of the questions we should be asking ourselves while listening to our esteemed panelists today are: is smart finance a regenerative, decentralized, inclusive, and sustainable new economic path that we can apply to solve the prejudicial issues that are negatively impacted our planet today? Can we really change our behavior and prejudicial trends by rewarding people for their positive actions and inactions to heal the earth? Involving responsible consumers and responsible producers in smart finance can become a sustainable development solution. Today, we will share with 4 incredible, amazing change makers. Without further ado, it is an honor to introduce to you Angela Ma, who has worked in both private and public sectors, including Fortune 500 companies and Harvard School of Public Health. She has held leadership positions in the area of executive management, media, and public relations and marketing for nearly 2 decades. She is the vice president of INT House, focusing summits in life sciences, clean tech, fintech, and robotic technologies. Angela has also served in various executive positions in financial institutions, including the Bank of America, Santander Bank, and United Commercial Bank. On the other hand, we also have Sanjeev P. Jadhav, founder of the InnoHub, which is an innovation growth platform that bridges international market entry with 3 global hubs, one in Boston, London, and Delhi. He's also co-founder of the Banyan Tree Capital, a boutique multifamily office investment advisory firm. Sanjeev is an active mentor and board advisor to startups and companies in the US, UK, Europe, and India. He also is the founder of Mass India Partnership, a nonprofit trade industry association that seeks to build trade and investment links between New England states and India. He is a former charter member of the Indus Entrepreneurs and an active advisor to a number of states in India in matters of development, as well as an advisor to a number of Indian governmental innovation efforts. He is passionate about global skill development and pursuing educational opportunity for all as the most powerful tool for development. We also have Glenn Lloyd, a pioneer in the field of transformative urban economic development for over 25 years. He is the president and founder of City Fresh Foods and is currently the executive director of the Foundation for Business Equity, designed to scale up local Black and Latino enterprises in Eastern Massachusetts. Over the last few decades, Glenn has been involved in the local food movement, more recently in helping to establish the Urban Farming Institute with the mission of supporting urban residents in the production of their own food for improved health and community resiliencies. And last but not least, we have David Kahn, who is replacing our dear friend Stephen Cotter, who apologized for attending an urgent matter today. David Kahn is executive producer and founder of the Life Hope Festival. He's an expert in blockchain and cryptocurrency industry after indigenous nations approached him to help them end poverty and suffering of their people. He had a dream vision of the Tree of Life in 2013, which gave rise to the idea of Life Hope Festival and the Earth Dollar, a currency backed by the health and wellness of Mother Earth. He is also the chairman of the US Blockchain Association and the president of the Nevada Blockchain Association. He's a co-author of the new book, The End of Poverty. David hopes to use the blockchain counterculture movement to alleviate global poverty and to heal our Mother Earth, or our home. David is a multi-talented individual and has worked with one of the world's top 50 of Fortune 500 company. He pioneered the energy drink category, being the first in the world to add ginseng to formulate energy drinks. He has a personal mission to end extreme poverty in his lifetime. I do welcome you all today, as we need to focus in regen.network, Natural Capital Accounting, route2.com, earthdollar.org, philanthropayments.com, Natural Capital Coalition. These are but a few examples of amazing game-changing stories already in the making and making a difference. Please feel free to check these ones out. Until now, like a hidden treasure, Natural Capital has, for the most part, been excluded from global and domestic decisions and policy making. And when it has been largely inconsistent, open to interpretation, or limited to moral arguments. I ask you, David, to start a conversation today, if you can help us understand why this is happening. Can you share with us the principles and objectives of natural capital accounting and the benefits it will bring? Is this the resurgence of a new economic trend? Can we change the world by changing ourselves and the economy? Why is the concept of rethinking finance so difficult for people to consider? How can we make it easier to digest and to be part of the younger generation day-to-day decision making? David, please, the floor is all yours.
I'd just like to explain about natural capital, what it is and how it came about, so people can understand. So with our current accounting system called the General Accepted Accounting Principles, GAAP, it says a tree has no value until you can chop it down. So a living tree has no value until you can produce a product from it. The same thing as lakes or rivers have no value. So that's why companies can dump toxic waste into the rivers and the lakes and without any problems, because there's no value in a lake or river. The same thing for the oceans. There has no value until you can exploit it, do fishing or do something of it. But natural capital accounting came about. It says that a tree as it is in a forest has value. a river has value as it is without exploiting it. A lake has value, and even minerals underground have a value. Right now, using the general accepted accounting principles, there's no value until you could dig up the gold or the oil underground or minerals or basically extract it, they call it. When humans extract it, it brings the value. But what natural capital accounting says, nature has its own value without the extraction. Let's say bees itself, like Albert Einstein says that if all the bees died off in the world, our food system would not work and we would be starving. So the bees itself pollinating our crops has a value. So we should protect all this value, including the trees, the forest, the fresh water, the oceans, and the rivers. That's the main gist of natural capital accounting. And it was developed by the World Bank initially, and it's also supported by the Prince's Trust, which is the Prince Charles Foundation. And then now it's the main body that is actually creating the framework. It's called the Natural Capital Coalition, which is developing it. And it's really 300 banks around the world getting together to create the framework. Around 50 banks already implemented and changed their accounting system, including the TD Bank that values it. The reason why we're not hearing about it is because the bankers, I think, have not marketed because they're busy buying up all the natural resources. So right now, most of the freshwater sources are being purchased by the bank because right now under general accepted accounting principle has no value. So what they're doing, they're buying up all the resources, then they're putting it on the books when it has the value. When they switch over, when all the switch over to natural capital accounting, basically the banks want using these natural capital to refinance the bank, because the bank they have a lot of debt and they have serious issues, and the natural capital is one of the ways to finance the bank. So we don't hear about it, but if people knew about it, they could actually use it to their benefit. You know? I mean, as a global commons.
So what you're saying is, the idea of the smart economy is to change the collateral in valuing these assets or environmental resource value to keep it underground. So by not exploiting them, but just using their value as not only an asset, but also as a resource that we need to preserve and conserve instead of exploit, right?
That's correct. Currently, money is created debt. So, all the debt, they print the money based on debt. So right now, all the banks are getting ready to create currencies with assets, including natural capital assets. So they're changing the monetary system as we speak. You know.
So, and through blockchain, which you are very experienced in, are we using this decentralized method to enable a more democratization of the capital resources based more on positive actions, planting trees, or using other kinds of incentives to motivate people to change their prejudicial habits? Is that how it works?
There are two groups of people. One group of people who are still in the extractive industry. They want to use blockchain to exploit the current system. Then there's another group of people who want to change the system. So there are two groups right now. Also, the blockchain is important because the U.S. Treasury has completed their cryptocurrency already. They have a national fractional gold-backed cryptocurrency ready to go in case of economic collapse. So it's completely 100% ready to go. It's gonna come, you know, eventually.
So now my question to you, and we still have this 4 minutes to go before we jump into another panelist. My question is also, how long will it take, do you feel, until the idea of having this economic new smart finance in place can replace or can complement the ordinary finance system that is the status quo today?
The World Bank and other institutions want to switch the entire system from general accepted accounting principles to natural capital accounting by 2030. So there's 10 years to go. And within those 10 years, most of the banks or wealthy people want to buy up the assets before the switch over, because now it's very cheap, but once it's switched over, it's going to become extremely valuable, you know. So there's 10 years ago. What
kind of indexes do we use in order to enable us to understand what is the conversion between what we use today, known as fiat currency, into this new cryptocurrency smart finance?
The indexes they use is they have around 13 measurements that they measure the value of the ecosystem services, they call it. So there is a combination of ecosystem services and the value of manufactured assets. So it's a combination of both.
Interesting. So this would be like, for example, carbon sequestration or clean water production, things like this, David?
Yeah, so they're evaluating ecosystem services. So carbon credits actually is an important component of the financing, because that's something people can understand. So another value is like a tree itself when it produces fruits like apples. So they could evaluate the apples, and the medicines like that also. And also fresh water itself has already a value by itself through natural capital accounting, is because it's already bottled and consumed and things like that. So that's how they're evaluating it. So there's a harder measurements like pollination. They're measuring, or the filtration of water through the trees they're measuring also has a value. Mangrove forests that filter, also hurricane protection has a value. So there are different methods that's harder to evaluate, but there are very smart economists and accountants working on it. And already there's around 20 countries already have that natural capital accounting system in place.
So interesting. Now, what I'd like to ask you in the last minute and a half is, how can we understand this in practical ways? Let's just say, 15-year-old or a 20-year-old kid in 5 years from now, will he be able to go to the store and purchase goods and services through its a cryptocurrency card that is based on this smart finance?
Yes, definitely. We ourselves, like example at the Earth Dollar, we're developing that. Is that this the Earth Dollar example is one of the cryptocurrency examples backed by the value of nature. So let's say Earth Dollar is partially backed by this spring water underground, and so it's an asset, right? And then it's actually linked to credit cards and debit cards, and through commercial banks, which provides it generates the what we call banking credits against the assets that allows it to convert the natural capital into fiat currencies and cryptocurrencies and exchange with each other. That's an example. So people can go to the stores, it's all electronic, it's not paper money, and people don't want paper money anymore because they're scared of the virus. So, so you swipe your debit card or credit card or your phone and you make a payment. It's you can see it in China, which is like the Alipay and the WePay, which is a very successful model for electronic payments. So this is, I think, the future.
I'm really glad to hear that, David. I appreciate your intervention, and just to realize that the future is right here in the present today. And now, Sanjeev, in your perspective, after listening to David, can you give us your opinion on the convergence of the present economic financial system and this natural capital account system? Do you see the value and the opportunity of your impact investment firm to turn to this new economic reality and offer it to your clients and governments? How do you foresee India implementing these principles? Please, Sanjeev, you have the floor.
I think it's a big challenge. I think the opportunity's there. I think people recognize the opportunity, but it's redefining the parameters of investments and investing returns and the risk profiles and what the risk tolerance is. And I think it's redefining how people look at profit, how people look at returns, and understanding kind of how the life cycles of your capital will kind of evolve as it's put to use. And I think the biggest driver for this can be institutional investors being able to build allocations into their asset allocation strategies, focusing on this because they're the only investors who invest alongside a very long horizon, almost generational investing. And so I think that's family offices, that's pension funds, that's university endowments. And I think family offices have kind of been moving in that direction. I would say probably in Europe a little bit more progressively than maybe in the US. So I think, I think it's a huge opportunity, but I think there's still a lot of work left to convince people on the investment side that it's worth the risk, but it's also an opportunity for them. I think in a market like India, impact investing is almost all investing now when you look at emerging technology investing, any style of venture investing, because at the end of the day, in a market and an economy and in a country where development is happening at a grassroots level from scratch, where you've had an economy and a society go from no landlines to everyone having a mobile phone, to rapid digitization, to digital currencies and digital transactions. And it's been a rapid digitization, probably faster than we've experienced in the West. So for a country like India, I think where the opportunity is to look at how can you drive innovation at scale and do it in a regenerative way, whether that's looking at agriculture and resource allocation and looking at, the creation of different models of farming. It's looking at delivery of healthcare solutions, which is going to be very different than how we, or even China, we in the West or even China has delivered healthcare, because you have a massive capital gap in a market like India, where the government has limited resources, where private investment has limited resources relative to the need. So I think the opportunity is there. I think the biggest thing in a market like India is how government becomes proactive in many ways, facilitating a pathway for institutional investors to enter that market, to get involved in this style of investing, and for government to be a partner as opposed to kind of a silent regulator or regulative body. Because I think in India, there's always the traditional risk profile that everyone has about how to actually extract capital or get a return on capital. And then you amplify it with the fact that a lot of investing now has to be impact driven. And how does government be a facilitator or partner in that?
That's quite interesting, because the facilitation of this conversion era from this economy and how that would impact. I would love to hear from any of you guys on how do you foresee, for example, Sanjeev, the transformation from an ROI that is now based on the return on investment, when everything has to change, the things we're investing in, as you said, and what the government policies or private policies will bring. So how, for example, David, that you're in this practice, how can we see this different new smart finance coins being interpreted or inclusive into this transition period Because I really like to understand that. And most probably, I want to remind our audience, please, to leave us any questions that you may have so that we can answer at the end in the WUVA Act. So how can we bring this new system to be, let's call it seamless to conversion of the actual present system now?
Let's say the way I see it, right? The two systems can work synergistically with each other. The reason why is that right now, with the COVID-19 situation, most countries are doing what we call quantitative easing, which they're printing tons of money, then giving it to the banks and putting it into the economy. So it causes a lot of inflation, and it devalues our currency based on the massive amounts of things. I don't know how long it could be sustained doing that, and how long this pandemic will last, and the government have to do that. So we're getting into a situation that creates an instability of the value of the currency. So let's say if you're a billionaire, and then after the buying power of the $1 billion you have is dropping every time you're holding the currency, we have an opportunity to create an asset-backed currency that stabilizes the value or actually increases its value, where it doesn't, the buying power stays the same or increases. So this is a great opportunity during the COVID-19 to make that switch, you know.
I hear you. Well, certainly we must take, you know, every path that will lead us into that direction. And Angela, I'd like to ask you, this notion of smart finance and looking at the alternative delivery pathways that we're just talking about, that we need to be very intentional about what, who, and why we are investing. And within your experience, with respect to people and planet, for example, Harvard College has been trying for the last few years to get Harvard Corporation to divest from fossil fuels, their investments. Like many other universities, they have not been successful just yet, but they certainly are working to get there. What would you suggest as a faster path to this conversion age from fossil fuel to green economy? In your opinion, can China and the USA get there in time before the point of no return in 2030?
Well, I'm definitely not an expert on China. However, my company, we have been, our headquarters here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the beginning of 2017-18, I have seen when I first joined Inti House, as we focus on our 4 major verticals, as you mentioned earlier, life sciences, clean tech, fintech, and robotic technologies. We really leverage and a lot of the, you know, especially today, we're talking about, you know, a lot of clean tech companies. We work with, I've worked with a lot of clean tech startups, or also like some of the company are revenue backed, that we directly invested in them, or through the summits, that global summits we Inti House hosted globally, we were able to help them to leverage partners from here in the United States, but also back in 2017-2018, we had quite a bit of activities in China, but also South Korea as well. And we have strong presence also in Germany, UK, and Israel. So we were able to do it really balanced, you know, so we're talking about, you know, cannot be just all the eggs in one basket. So I cannot say, you know, even back then, you know, for the smart financing, from getting them investors, not just all, you know, from one country, for instance, like just from China, but we also seen the gap. There are a lot of the investment opportunities, financing opportunity from India, South Korea, and also other European countries as well. So we have been advising, working with a lot of our startups, and I see that, you know, they are, you know, coming from a traditional banking system, from business banking, you know, from big banks I used to work for. A lot of startup or even revenue-backed companies, they were not even eligible for any kind of loans or any kind of funding. And as I say, as you mentioned about, like college, universities wanted to work with that. But I think it really takes the collaboration and partnership on, for instance, here in the state level and the city level, state of Massachusetts, has been so helpful in guiding the entire ecosystem on the startups and different entrepreneurs, like for clean tech wise. Greentown Lab here right in Somerville. And also, like the government has been, local government, state, city government has been putting a lot of injection of money, of like, mini loans and all that, especially right now with the, like to go back to Sanjeev's, during this like, unusual time, right? And even in the state level, we have what we call small business strong and helping a lot of companies getting help technically, financially as well. And through we're really guiding them on loans and investment as well.
Excellent. So yes, of course, through that, trying to give them the motivation to go more into the impact investment. And I was wondering in that side, as we've seen in other, like we were talking about this tree coin, for example, Glenn, in your opinion, positive economic trends like horizontal urban gardening for food and green islands around the cities can provide the motivation for people to be rewarded to follow these initiatives. In your experience, how long until we recognize the imminent use of growing our own food, of creating our own sustainable electricity and our own homes by creating positive change and as well getting paid for it? Is this something that you see already happening within your environment and your ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I listen, and I think I want to step back a second, because I think the general theme here is we're kind of all held hostage by the current finance system, right? And we're talking about return on investment from a pure profit generated model, and that's how money flows. Whether you're a banker, whether you're a private, investor, private equity, all the way to VC world. So I think the challenge we all face when we're conscious of the fact that one, the situation is not well, we're ill, right? So we know we have all the stats of that. You led, quite eloquently on that. A lot of us know what it could look like, right? We should be living a different life in relationship to each other, but also in relationship to, our habitat. The challenge is what's the path? Because we're kind of stuck in this financial system. What is that pathway? How do we make the first steps? And I think to your question, that's the one we really have to figure out. And I think that, there's a couple of projects in real time that I'm working on that maybe shed some light to that if I could. Just a quick, if I could run through a couple. One is, I know I didn't realize I have some fellow bankers on the phone call, even though I work within a bank. But I'm currently working on a lot of racial equity issues, and so we're looking at alternative financing to help mitigate the wealth gap. And the mechanisms that we're looking at is through CDFIs, right? Community Development Finance Institutions, which has a little more flexibility where we can get some of the kind of institutional capital at lower cost. And how do we bring that into some of these projects? But we're still playing the return on investment game, but maybe we can be more creative and more innovative of what we're doing with that capital. So that can work towards green projects too, right? As one example. Another one quickly is around broader ownership and who's at the table. And so another quick project, one of my food service companies, actually my food service company that I helped start, is looking at developing an employment stock purchase plan. So it's a little bit different in terms of kind of capital and equity, but these are the folks that help build the company and now will have a chance to actually own a piece of the company, which gets into kind of the racial equity mode. And so how are we making that affordable and so we have more ownership happening at the local level? And the third project I'm currently working on, which ties in, is and I'll get personal here. I've inherited 10 acres and a farmhouse in just north of, in southern New Hampshire. And it was about to get sold. I said, wait a second, how do we repurpose this back to a productive space? And so two things we're looking at, it's oil heated right now. And so how do we bring in technologies that bring energy that can get us off the grid? And so we're at some interesting conversations around that. And then also we've got this fertile ground behind us. And so we're looking at doing more of a CSA model where the families I'm working with will collectively own the space, but also will produce for more families back urban and in the surrounding neighborhood. And so, and with all those projects, you have money at the tip of the spear. And how do you essentially extract ourselves from the system where it's all about the return and when? And so I think that to get to the bottom line, I think of the question I would say is we have to define returns. It can't just be clearly about the profit. It's about what other things are we doing. And I appreciate Sanjeev. You know, it was like we are bound by a lot of these formal institutions because they're really setting the architecture up and controlling the conversation. We have to take control of that conversation in a different way and say no. There's another definition. It's not just you put $1 in and you get 10% back per year, whatever that is. It's no. I think to David's point, there's other ways of measuring success that has to do with whatever, fertility of the soil or whatever, the regenerative part of the equation. So I'm eager to hear how we start shifting because a lot of my examples were local, and I think it all starts local, but also how do we set these examples so that actually they could be shared regionally and globally?
That's a great point. I don't know if David, maybe you can help us.
Yes, I would. I'd like to give some examples, right? So people can understand. So let's say if we have a currency backed by a lake, and that lake is polluted, it has very little value because the water quality index is very poor. So let's say the asset is almost very they say is not much value, right? So back to currency, but actually if we clean up the lake, it becomes a tremendous asset value. So there's incentive to clean up the lake to create that value. So to increase the value of the asset, right? So another example is a forest that has been, let's say, slash burn or deforested. And if actually we plant more trees, each tree has a value. It becomes more valuable as you reforest or regrow the forest. So it's the same thing because since the asset of the forest or the water is being used in a currency, people can understand that. Let's say if the area is like a desert, has very little value, but actually backing a currency. But if we actually plant trees and create an oasis, it becomes extremely valuable. So now there's an incentive. So the return on investment is actually to increase the value of the assets itself, which we call natural capital assets. So that is a tremendous opportunity for return on investment for that, because if you take something that has no value and create tremendous value out of it, it's a huge return on it.
Can I jump in? I wonder if we could even like push the conversation so that still keeps it within your typical kind of asset liability on a balance sheet, and that's heading in the right direction. But what I was trying to push for is can we have conversations where it says there's another value. I don't know how you monetize the value of what let's just say I guess I'm trying to think of food actually, but if we're reproducing healthier soil and then those seeds are producing food, is there a value back that you're not associated so much with the dollar value? So I guess that's really what I was pushing. Is there different definitions for return beyond just the basis of cash and asset value, I guess?
Well, and also I understand for our discussion, this is a separate economy, whereas the impact is based on the environment. But what happens to the normal, ordinary economy, and how does that convert in the same value of what you're saying, Glenn? How can we make a dollar value into a green value, and then when we eliminate the dollar so that it becomes only one currency? Is that what's going to happen? Anyone, guys?
Because right now most currencies are traded against each other through a currency trading platform. Let's say you go to China and try to spend like Canadian dollar there. It has no value because you know, you cannot buy anything in China with that. Or you go to Europe with Canadian dollar, it has no value, has to be exchanged. So actually the exchange platform is the key, the hub that allows the exchange of the value of these different currencies. So we have a currency backed by, as like fresh water, some backed by forest, or backed by gold. It has a value that's exchanged with other currencies. So it's not a single currency, it's multiple currencies. Some are fiat backed, which is backed by the federal government. Some will be backed by different type of assets. It could be real estate or other things, you know, or the trees or fresh water. So people will exchange it and can buy goods or services by exchanging these currencies, either physically or automatically, because like a credit card is exactly that. When you go to travel a credit card and you go to Europe, right, with a US credit card, the credit card could be converts your US dollar to euros, and you see it on your bank statement. So it's basically, it is like that, you know. So all these currencies can be tied to a card that can be exchanged automatically. The currency backed by gold, backed by trees, backed by water, and it exchanges it, you know.
Interesting. So it's an exchange, a clearinghouse. I think that answers your question, Glenn. How would you guys see it, Sanjeev and Angela? How do you see this, the implementation? Has any of your businesses been touched by this idea before, or do you see it coming up on age right now?
I think it goes back to what Glenn was saying. How do we change or how do we move forward the paradigm for institutional investors to be leading the charge? Because if we don't change that paradigm, how do we have private capital kind of flowing in to these types of investor classes? I mean, I go back to, and maybe I'm missing something, but I go back to government has to somehow be a driver, because if we just look at what happened in the US with opportunity zones and this whole hurrah that came with opportunity zones, and all of a sudden, you know, asset classes and institutional investors were trying to do this and do that, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity for incentivization to be created, whether it's through tax policy, whether it's through some sort of structuring, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in a country like India, to really allow investors to see the benefits that they may be a little wary of taking that leap of faith at this time. Government can be the greatest partner, I think, in driving that. I think if we rely on some of the other regulatory changes to take place, that's a very slow process, I think creating policy that allows for a mitigation of some of the risk, and making that return more palatable can really, I think, change the flow of capital.
Interesting. I actually heard Annie Gecki, who actually has joined us today. Hello, Annie, on Smart Cities on a previous panel, talking about the same idea of the incentives, tax incentives, and so on. What do you think, Angela?
So in the past, we haven't really quite seen that was happening yet, but I do, as foreseeing some of the activities that what David or Sanjeev saying, especially I see that, you know, in the global environment, the trend, for instance, in Israel, and they have very, very strong agriculture technology, you know, on the ocean and also farmlands, like amazing. I do really foresee that, you know, this can be, you know, started as like a small mini trend, you know, as well as what Glenn was talking about earlier. And there will be a way to pay these this of, you know, like really the shift of paradigm on a currency, or even how to really use that to really fuel this ecosystem to sustain it. But that yet still needs not just the US, but also other countries to chime in that has that ability to, as I mentioned, Israel and others, even South African countries.
Excellent. So we do have a question from an audience right now, or actually it's a statement. She says, here is an opportunity to shift to a healthier economic equity is through the implementation of some of land value capture. And she also posted an interview on the Earth Rights Institute at the United Nations. I think that is valuable information. And at this moment, what my biggest concern is, of course, we can see institutional investors. We can see how the money is going to be shifting and it's the availability for exchange. But my question is more on the day-to-day person. And even though we are still trying to change our prejudicial habits, how would the individual participate within this economy at a smaller scale? Can we reward somehow with these different coins or currency that are already asset-backed, have also a value for the actions and inactions an individual takes? Is there anything any of you guys would like to share about the individual participation of a day-to-day normal person and how they can contribute or collaborate with this kind of smart finance?
I'll jump in quickly. I'll go ahead, David.
Go ahead.
Please, Glenn. Go ahead, Glenn, and then we'll have.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad you said that, because that actually is one of the most critical and influential players in this whole space, which is the end user. And so for me, it starts with education. I mean, early on, of how your behavior interacts with your environment, and to make good decisions. And so that's everything from, you know, the quality and the how, you know, who made your clothes, where it came from, to your food. And so we've seen, you know, the growth of, you know, CSAs and farmers markets over the time, and you know, the whole thing around organic. That's all coming from a lot of consumer kind of, you know, from an educated point of view, solar and these types of things. I think what I like what I believe it was Angela just said. Sanjeev is we need to subsidize or do R&D in the area so we can actually make this more accessible to folks, because the extractive products are they're less expensive, and they're just so easy to get a hold of. So I do think that government and others can play a role in helping pave the way, but I think it starts with the educated consumer, and I'll stop there.
Absolutely. David, please, and also if you could add, I was very impressed by your idea of ending poverty in your lifetime. We also would love to contribute and collaborate. How do you see that happening? And again, to the question on how the individuals, how can we all participate in this smart finance?
You know, we through the last 5 years, we have seen the explosion of crowdsource funding, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other platforms. And, you know, there's a lot of projects being financed by ordinary people there. We can, to expand on, if people are already putting money in there, the average person, if institutional or family offices can supplement it, there's people there and expand it. I think that is the best way to go. Instead of building something new, we just support the platforms that's already successful and already doing it. So I think that is one of the ways to go about it, to bring in more ordinary people into this type of basically smart financing.
Your thoughts, Sanjeev, please?
No, I think what Glenn and what David were saying is there is also a huge role, as they've said, for the retail investor, right? And I think this goes back to innovation, right? We've had innovation in a general sense, whether it's technology, whether it's across sectors, but what's needed, and I think we've seen it with the Indigos and the crowdfunding platforms, is we need innovation in financial instruments and financial products that are accessible, that are understandable for the retail average investor. And I think the market's there, right? You have an engaged, educated consumer in, you know, the sub 45-year-old, I would say, average investor, at least definitely in the West. And I think the same can be said around the world in developing economies, where people want to feel something about where their money goes and how they're investing. And I think that's what we've seen when we were, I think it was Glenn or someone was talking about the divestment issue. It's been the young that have driven that change and transformation from an institutional perspective. And I think the same will go from a retail perspective. And I think whether it's financial instruments like bonds or various other instruments that can really provide pools of capital that can start creating the groundswell, I think it's needed, right? And retail investors are as much an important piece as institutional investors are in this.
Absolutely. Well, what I would like now is to invite you guys to perhaps a call to action, a motivation, thought, and statement from each one of you before we end. We still have 10 minutes, and I would like to spend this 10 minutes listening to your call to action, if possible, please. We'll start with you, Angela, please.
Okay. I think we really need to tap into our ecosystem. You know, we're talking about sustainability, and you know, from the past few years, from looking at from the landscape of investment, you know, direct investment, or you know, like all different, you know, from other countries or from here, we, you know, whether some of them are crowdfunding, but we need to really looking at start from our own very own ecosystem. But we also need to branch out. We are, for instance, here in Massachusetts, we're very fortunate. We have quite a bit of other, you know, like technologies from Israel, technologies from all the entrepreneurs from Asian countries, are all here in the hub. But how can we, you know, the call of action is like, we have so much resources as right now, you know, from, we talk about the retail side, you know, people looking at, wow, you know, we need money to do this and that, but there are actually, you know, without, you know, the past 6 months really give us a different look of looking at how can we do things differently, more effectively, more self-sustained, you know, self-sustaining in a way. So I think, you know, we to really tap into our own network and continue to build on some of the things that we talk about, you know, such as, you know, we talk about, you know, like the true alternative delivery pathways, how we can really helping on the finance side, even including the banks. You know, I think they are now more open to help. You know, I'm talking about on, you know, the clean tech area, you know, and the clean energies. There are some, but we need to really open each other's eyes to help, not just like where are they, you know, like, and look far, but sometimes it's so close by. And I think building this strong network and continue to do so, as like my company and myself been doing with our network, our friends, to do that, we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Angela. That's actually, I think, what this whole event is about, uniting like-minded people to bring about the discussion and the change. Glenn, please, if you could, in 2 minutes, your call to action today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have different roles in society, and so I do think that there's you know, leadership wherever you sit needs to really step up, understand, you know, the intricacies of what we're happening. I would say I'd step back and say, you know, when we think about finance, it's an imagined system. Someone imagined this, and now we're living within it. We can reimagine it. So I'd really push us to think outside of the box around what we've been dealt with. And then everything down to just every individual. I think it's the time we can't sit and watch it happening around us. It's about being proactive and saying, okay, well, what role do I play and how do I push forward? It is easy as like educating myself more of extractive energies and what, and am I using them? Am I playing a role? To how do I actually start changing my behavior, which is the hard part. So I think it's really, it's becoming more aware and then changing behaviors. And we all have an amazing part to play because we all have budgets, we're spending dollars, and we're influencing our kids and our parents and, you know, our uncles and aunts and so on and so forth. So I do think that, you know, everyone has the power at their fingertips.
Love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Glenn. Sanjeev, in 2 minutes, your call to action, please.
Sure. No, I think piggybacking off what everyone else has said, it is about advocacy and sitting in your own chair and realizing how you can play a small or even large role in driving the conversation, driving the transformation, and creating the connectivity that is probably the most powerful tool to make all of this possible. And I think what we've tried to do at Banner Tree Global and the InnoHub is kind of focus on some global hubs and kind of build that connectivity between these hubs in terms of how innovators are connecting with investors. And a lot of it is education, right? And a lot of it is knowing about the opportunities, because I think investors and whether it's institutional or retail want to make a difference, right? Charity is kind of almost an embedded part of human nature in many respects. And it's a question now of how we kind of provide the pathways, provide the tools, provide the instruments to allow for that. And I think that's probably the biggest change that we all can be a part of and help drive.
Thank you for that. I certainly do believe humanity has the power to change. And now, David, please, to wrap up, what is your call to action?
My personal call to action is I'm on a mission to end global poverty in my lifetime, and I'd like people to help support me on that mission. The reason why I'm on this mission is because my eldest brother died from starvation in China after World War II. So that really deeply affected me personally. And my father was so hungry, he strapped a bicycle tire onto himself and tried to escape from China and swam the shark-infested oceans from China to Macau to escape death from starvation. So the reason why I want to end global poverty in my lifetime and why I'm on that mission is because I don't want it. There's still millions of people dying from starvation around the world, and it's created by the system itself. And like we could reimagine the system to end that, because everything is man-made, is man-created. So we're hosting an event on November 9 to 20 called Conference of the Movements, to bring movements around social grassroots movements around the world together to reimagine and reset all the world's systems. So the World Economic Forum announced what they call the Great Reset on January 2021. They're actually resetting the entire economic, social, political, all the systems around the world. And they are basically the 1% that is driving the world economy. Is that, do we want to be a passenger or do we want to be the driver? So they are the drivers. If they resetting all the world systems due to the coronavirus, is our chance, the people, to have a voice in that. So that's what we're doing in November 9 to 20, 2020, called Conference of the Movements.
Excellent. Guys, I could not be more grateful, Sanjeev, Angela, Glenn, and David, and all, of course, of our audience that has joined us today. I would like to, first of all, thank you. And I do want to reiterate that the message I got from today's conversation is that we do have the power to change. We have the tools. People are already working on it. We've mentioned Regen.network, natural capital accounting as coming from the UN in different countries being involved, Route2.com, philanthropayments.com, and Natural Capital Coalition. Please, everyone, look at the wonderful profiles, search and seek on the pages of these wonderful panelists, and collaborate with your own individual participation by joining like-minded people like ourselves in this panel and in the different panels you'll see today. So I invite you all to keep enjoying the panelists for the rest of the day and for tomorrow. And I just wanted to thank you all from the deepest portion of my heart that believes in humanity, that we will be able to reach the point of no return and transform it into incredible opportunities for all on this wonderful blue planet. So bless you all. Thank you so much for participating. And you take it.